Welcome everyone to the Lofi Podcast. Today my guest is Nothern Drift. Welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it. I've been a fan of the show. I've probably watched every episode a few times now, I think. And I'm really very excited to be part of this. I think you're doing a great thing for the community. And I'm sure we'll talk more about the community, but yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I mean, anytime I hear that there's someone in the lo-fi community who's actually been listening to the episodes, it's so fulfilling to hear. And then whenever they say that it's been an encouragement as well, you know, it's just almost as if even if I get only 2 more listeners, the fact that this has been encouragement to just one producer means that this project's been a success. So thank you for the kind words.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. So just to get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of lo-fi? Like, who's Nothern Drift in your day-to-day life?
Yeah. So my name is Dave. I live in upstate New York, which in the U.S., which a lot of people, when they think of New York, they think of New York City. But I actually live in the countryside of New York and closer to the mountains. The Adirondack Mountains are big national park or state park up here. And, in my day job, I own a company that does like low voltage cabling and electronic security. We're a construction company basically. And then I have a couple of kids. I have an 11 and 14-year-old and I'm married. I have a wife and a dog, so I have all that stuff going on. So, lo-fi is kind of that nice little break from all the other responsibilities of the world. At least it was. It's going to be a little bit more of a responsibility these days.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that, talking about like your label you've started up and things like that. I'm sure as time goes on in the lo-fi scene and you get more responsibility, it's almost like trying to juggle so many different tasks.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a difference between the day job and lo-fi and writing music. There's there's a responsibility when it comes to doing things like running labels and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it's a work of love and there's so much that you get out of it. You don't have to do it day to day. So it's just a different thing altogether. It's hard to compare.
Yeah. And well, besides lo-fi, do you have any other hobbies or interests that you do to sort of chill after your day job?
Yeah, so it's winter here where I am in New York, or just we're ending the winter season, and I'm actually a ski instructor. So I started doing that a few years ago, and my kids started to learn how to ski. So I'm a skier and a snowboarder, and had the opportunity to start teaching, and so I do that on my weekends, and so that's a ton of fun. And then come summer, it's beautiful up here in the summers, and so we get to go out and do a lot of hiking and mountain biking and stuff like that. So that's what we like to do here.
Man, that sounds amazing. It sounds quite adventurous as well too. You've got skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking. I mean, there's so much that you can do out there that's quite different to music actually, but I'm sure in some way or another that also acts as inspiration, I suppose, being out in nature and so on.
Yeah, I think when I was trying to figure out what my name was going to be, my artist name, I should say, Nothern Drift, I was like, I want it to be something reflective of where I live, because I think, for me, like, there's nothing better than being out in the woods, in the forest, on your own. Like, I love it, like a hike by myself in the woods, where you just have the ability to just kind of be alone with your own thoughts. And to me, like, that is kind of the same type of feeling I like to convey when I write. It's like that feeling of being one with yourself and nature and all that. To me, it sounds a little bit corny sometimes when I think about it, but man, it's such a great feeling to just like be able to reflect, because we live in such a busy world. As I was sitting here and we're warming up, I'm like, man, I got to shut down email and Discord and Messenger and all this stuff. Like, everyone is always able to get in touch with you, and to be able to like shut down and go someplace different for just a little bit of time, I think is something we all need, especially right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting that moment to sort of just sit down, reflect, and just be out in nature. Like, even myself, it's one of the most refreshing things I can do because I live more in the countryside myself. There's not as many sort of hiking places as maybe you have, but still, whenever you get that opportunity, and like, it's just, there's something about it that's so serene, and you can take that emotion and sort of put it into the music you produce. And it's, yeah, it's one of the things as artists where we can blend all of our experiences into the art that we create, which is so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, to get into sort of your musical journey, how you got into music and producing it, etc. When did you start playing music? And was this like something that you did at a younger age and then did as you grew older, you sort of learnt more instruments, or where did it start?
Yeah, I was lucky in that my parents, my mom and my dad, they like always had music playing. They love um I, my dad especially, he was a big fan of blues music, and I grew up listening to all shades of the blue. There's an artist named Roy Buchanan who it was one of his favorites, became one of my favorites. I eventually I discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan, who at an early age became my first guitar hero. Right, he was the guy I wanted to play like, and so I grew up just constantly surrounded by music. My parents didn't play music, but they were always playing music. And when when I was like 12 or 11 years old, I said I wanted to play the guitar, and they're like, "Well, you have to go buy it yourself. We're not going to buy it for you because we want you to stick with it. And if you buy it yourself, you're going to stick with it." So I saved up my money. I bought my first guitar, and then they paid for guitar lessons. So I ended up taking guitar lessons for quite a few years. And later on in high school, I joined the high school jazz band, and that was kind of like, for me, the turning point of like for me musically. Like, I started to kind of dig into theory. I started to, get outside of like rock music, and like at the time I was probably really big into Green Day or Nirvana was probably like my top two bands I was listening to at the time. And but jazz, like, I just kind of grabbed me. I just enjoyed listening to jazz, and had like some amazing experiences. I had a great high school band conductor, and there was a friend of mine who was an amazing drummer in high school. Like, we kind of just started playing together a little bit outside of school, and that was my first intro to like making music and improvising. Right, like that's where like blues and jazz are very similar in that there's a lot of improvisation. It's a lot of listening to music and hearing, and that's kind of like my whole musical upbringing revolves around, like, I don't really read music. I feel like I feel it, and I listen, and that all kind of stems from like the beginnings. And I don't know what it is, but I've never really like got into like playing in bands too much until I was like much later, and it was like my late 20s, and I'm in my mid 40s now. I'm an old guy. But in my mid 20s, I got into an indie band. I was living in Denver at the time, and we did only original music, and that was like the change for me. Like, I never wanted to be in a cover band. I like learning cover songs, but I don't like playing them. I don't like doing things verbatim. I like to create and build my own music, and that was like the first opportunity where I got together with like-minded people, and we were like an indie trio, female fronted. It was amazing. I had a fantastic time, and I was like, there's just no experience like being on stage playing songs that you wrote in front of people who actually like it. And it was like then it was quite a few years later where I actually like got into bluegrass and old time music, and I found these I ended up moving to Minnesota, and there's like this big bluegrass old time scene in Minnesota where they have these festivals where everybody gets together, and there are other places too, but it just happened to be in Minnesota where I found it. And you would just go and you would sit in a circle and you play old time music. I play the banjo, which I'd been playing since college, and I'd started to learn the fiddle. And so I just started bringing these things and playing with these other people. And so I've just started like expanding myself musically. And then I just kind of stopped. I had kids and everything just took a break. And then, as everybody else has said, like the pandemic hit, we started spending more time inside, and I found out about this lo-fi music, and I'm like, man, this is just really cool. It kind of brings in all these other genres that I like. And I said, I think I can do that. I think I can make it. And a couple of years ago, I just dove into it head first, and here I am.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a bit of traveling too, as well. Like, I mean, sorry, my American geography is not the best. So you mentioned Denver. So that's Colorado?
Yeah. So Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you went to Minnesota and now you're in New York.
That's right. Yeah. I did the whole trip through the U.S. As a kid, like out of college, I was like, man, like I got to see the world. I got to know what's out there. And the U.S. is such a big place. Like, the East Coast is so much different than the Rocky Mountains where Denver is. And I was really big into snowboarding. So I moved out there to really just kind of snowboard and see what else was out there. And then I moved away for a job to Minnesota, Minneapolis. Actually, a lot of people are obviously familiar with Minneapolis now, which is an amazing city. There's so much music that comes from Minneapolis. Prince is probably one of the most well-known. And that's where I met my wife. So I actually spent like 10 years there and now made it back to New York, which is where I'm from. So
right. Wow. It's really interesting. You mentioned there that like America's so big because, I mean, for me, I live in Ireland and a lot of people around here, I don't think really grasp the size of North America. I mean, to us, whenever people say America, we assume it's like the size of a country in Europe, right? It's the same size as France or Spain or something like that. But no, I mean, whenever you include all the states together, there's so much to see. There's so many different climates. And like there's as in terms of music as well. Like you said, in Minnesota, they've got those bluegrass roots and so on. Because I actually know a guy over here and he married a lady from Minnesota. And her whole family actually all play bluegrass music. And they even organized some of the festivals in Minnesota as well. So whenever you mentioned that, like that just came to mind.
yeah, it's funny. There's something about Minnesota, like they are a melting pot of musical styles. I mean, there's big Scandinavian music influence there. And there are like groups that play Scandinavian fiddle tunes. There's a big Cajun music scene, which is I would not expect in the frozen tundra of Minnesota, but it's a really great place to go and just kind of discover like, man, there's like so much out there, so many different genres. It's crazy.
Yeah. Once again, I'm showing my ignorance of American geography. Sorry, but whenever you see Cajun, so that's like Louisiana, right? Or,
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, just,
your American geography better
okay.
than you say you do.
Yeah. I just I don't want to embarrass myself on the public podcast, So. Yeah. So then, so sort of 2020 came along. I mean, this is like a common theme in so many of the episodes that people then discover lo-fi music. We're all indoors. We see these streams on YouTube and so on. And so did your journey into the music production start along with your discovery of lo-fi, or were you producing music before that as well as writing songs?
I've never really produced. I always wrote. In fact, I hated back when I was really about, I plugged the guitar into the amplifier. I don't use any pedals and I crank up the gain and that's the sound, right? Like I didn't like back then anyway, before I started lo-fi, I'm like, I don't like effects chains. I don't like complicated things. I want things like as raw as they get. That's why I love acoustic instruments. Like I play a lot of acoustic guitar and other acoustic stuff because there's not much to it. It's simple and the sound comes from how you play it and the instrument itself. And it wasn't until I started doing lo-fi where I was like, got into producing and I'm like, opened up my eyes and ears to like what else I could do. And I mean, I hardly ever used delay before, and then suddenly I've got 20 delay plugins and 50 reverb plugins. Like I don't know what to do with them all, but it's different, but I really like it. And as someone creating music on their own, because I do it mostly on my own or with collaborations with other people, but I can create so much sound in my studio by myself, and it's I don't know, something about it. It's really appealing. It's more than I thought I'd ever get out of it. I don't know how to explain it really, but I've really enjoyed the process of learning, and everything I do. Like I do 150%, right? So I hop in and I learn everything I can know about it. I probably watch every podcast, which is why I watch your podcast so much, but it's like, I just get into it, but music has been something that's like taken me my entire life. And now this is just another branch off of what I've done before. And, but this one has been one of the most rewarding, things that I've done musically because of the exposure, the ability to get your music heard, and the community that you meet doing it. Like that part, I never would have anticipated when I started this journey that I would meet so many amazing people, and get to like work with people across the world writing music, and sharing it with the universe, really, right? I mean, it's just like I never thought about that. I just thought, I was like, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna put a drum loop on, play my guitar, and then throw it on Spotify and get 10 plays, and that's where I started. But that's not where I'm at now. It's wild.
Yeah. I mean, whenever we start and then we look back as to how far we've grown in like the lo-fi scene, and we see that there's so much of it that's been the community that's helped us to grow. And it's sort of that, what's that? It's that sense of family that we have, where we're encouraging each other, building each other up and giving us sort of positive criticism and how we can improve our tracks and so on. And that's what I love so much about this community. And we see that how collaboration helps us to grow. And it's very hard to sort of find someone who's really selfish here. You're talking to everyone, you're in Discord communities, and all of that it encourages you to be a better producer, to grow in your production skills and so on. And I think we're almost constantly learning from each other as well as we grow in our musical journey.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And like I've learned from so many people in Discord is really amazing, right? It's like, I started it, I think it was Will Hatton's Discord, where I met Grayware, who was on your podcast, I think just recently. And he was one of the guys that was instrumental in giving me feedback and saying, "Hey, this sounds really good. Like, I like what you're doing. You have a style that I can recognize." Like, I remember that. Like, and that was like, I had maybe like 10, 20 streams, and these people that I'd been watching on Spotify with thousands of streams were telling me that my music was good. And I just couldn't believe it. And there's so many amazing people that I've worked with, that I've got to know. Like, it was between Grayware, or Cucamello, or Bad at Math, or all these people that as I started learning and about the scene and listening to music, I would see their music pop up, and I'm like, man, these guys are so good. And now I get to talk to them, and they were giving me feedback, and I'm collaborating with them. Like, it was such an amazing experience as somebody learning and getting into the scene. I don't know if there's very many scenes or music scenes like that, where you can come in and everyone embraces you and tries to prop you up and help you get better. And the feedback you talked about, like Will has a Discord with the feedback section where you can put your music in, and people will tell you, how to improve it. Luke Daly was another one who I early on got in his Discord. He had a great YouTube series going for a while, but he's still got an amazing Discord community. And like, there's a whole group of people there that do the same thing. And it's all about like making sure that feedback is given. You can post your stuff, but it's like, give feedback first. Like that was like a really interesting way that people, like, you could get feedback, but you had to give it. So not only were you getting feedback, but you're learning how to listen. And I think that's part of like how we become better lo-fi musicians, is not just playing music, but listening to other people and listening critically. And I think that like those groups, for anybody getting into the scene, it's like, go to those groups, listen to music, and give feedback, whether you believe that your feedback is like, if you like, I think, it's very easy as a musician, especially someone getting into it, to think that your feedback isn't valuable, right? Because you're like, what do I know? I'm just starting out doing this. I don't know anything. But I think anybody coming into and listening to your music can have valuable information And it may be better if they're not a traditional seasoned lo-fi producer, because they're going to hear it from the perspective of your potential listeners. So they might hear something completely different, and that a producer is going to hear. So I think it's important for anybody that wants to get into this genre and wants to get better to just participate in those feedback loops.
Yeah, absolutely. Because while you were talking there, I was reminded of, I don't know, have you heard of Victor Wooten before?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. There's one thing that he said that I heard, I'd have to say probably about 7 years ago now, but it's really stuck with me, where he said, when he was talking about music as a language, he said that whenever, a child's growing up, they're talking with people who are in their 70s, in their 80s. They've had all of this time to learn and grow. And in the same time, we should be the same as musicians. We might have only just started producing, like, say, in the context of the lo-fi community. We can chat with people who's been producing for years and learn from them. Just because we're new to something doesn't mean that we should be only talking with people who are also sort of green beans in this whole genre. Because if we do that, we can only sort of grow a certain amount. But if everybody is helping each other, we can glean from the people who've been there for years. And there even might be a few things that we bring fresh to the scene, or new ideas that we have, that then the people who are sort of pioneers in lo-fi, they can even learn from us. And so instead of, maybe in some places you'll see that people who are sort of veterans in the community will be a little bit more prideful, but I don't see that at all in lo-fi. And yeah, it's really heartwarming to have that community.
Yeah, I agree. Those are, and I think Victor Wooten is a very wise man. I've seen a number of things that he's posted online, and he's an amazing musician in his own right. So if he said it, it must be true.
Yeah, no, there's so many things that he said that I've gleaned from, and yeah, just words of wisdom they can always go a long way. So in terms of lo-fi, like both of us, we produce kind of like folk hop, acoustic lo-fi, sort of the genre we've started to lean into. And it's kind of a genre that started to grow. Like, what are your thoughts on this? And like, I know we were talking on Discord prior to getting this episode recorded. Like, maybe you could share with us a little bit on how you find good tone and getting the instruments to sit right in the mix and so on. And yeah, just what's your whole idea with this acoustic lo-fi genre that's appeared?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, when I first heard lo-fi, like specifically, like, you talk about the sleepy lo-fi where it was about electric guitars and piano and stuff. I'm like, this is really nice. It's like a very organic sound, like not the beat driven lo-fi of the 2000s. Like, lo-fi kind of shifted into that real instrument type of sound. And I was like, man, this is really nice. What happens if I add a banjo to this? And I started adding some banjo into it. And then somebody turned me on to C4C, which I'm sure most people have heard of in the scene. And I was like, wow, this is actually a genre. Like, somebody's out there making amazing lo-fi music driven by folk roots. And he does it. He's an incredible person. He's done an amazing job in trying to kickstart like this movement of folk hop, and a lot of people are now, especially in the producer community, know about it. There's actually just in this last month there's 2 compilations going on, at least that I know of for folk hop music. But go back to my initial discovery of C4C, I'm like, this is kind of everything I love playing. I love using acoustic music. I like this instrumental music. I'm more of I've always gravitated towards instrumental music for whatever reason. I can't hear lyrics. Like, I don't hear the words, but I hear the melodies. And so I've always lyrics don't gravitate with me like melodies do, for whatever reason it is. That's just how my brain works. And to kind of feel like, to hear that kind of driven down into almost like that folk, bluegrass, lo-fi, everything mixed together. It just blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. And I'm like, man, this is something I have to be part of. Like, it speaks to me. I have an entire kit. You can maybe see some of it behind me of like acoustic guitars and banjos and stuff. And I'm like, I got to be able to use some of that in this lo-fi. So I just started putting it together. You know, I'm still trying to figure out like what my sound is in terms of that folk pop genre. Like you know, it's constantly changing from when I first discovered it to like where I'm at now. But one thing I started kind of figuring out more recently when it comes to recording folk pop and acoustic guitar specifically is that, you know, like when I first started writing, I was like really worrying about mic placement and the mics I was using and getting the right positioning. Like I was started out, like I was like, oh, I'm going to have a match pair of these Rode NT4 condenser mics. And I started recording in an XY pattern, you know, because that's like what all the pros do. They do everything in an XY pattern. And I'm like, that's what I need to do, record in stereo, whatever. And it's great. I got some really good sound with that. And but then I just started like, I got this a Warm Audio 47 Junior. It's you know, it's a ripoff of the 47, what is it, the Universal Audio, whatever it is. It's a nice mic. But I keep it at my desk on a boom, which is what I'm talking on now. And now I just like don't even bother shutting my studio door when I record. I just like slide the mic over, throw the guitar up, and start playing it. And then I let like whatever noises are going on around me actually make their way into the tracks. And I have a few songs that I've released in the recent past, where it's like I can hear that my kids are slamming doors, the dog's barking, and it adds like that natural ambiance, which works really well for lo-fi and folk pop. So, like I've had a few conversations online with people about this. I'm like, don't worry too much about the equipment and don't worry about the environment. Like for this genre of music specifically, like embrace like what's going on around you and embrace the imperfections because it actually works really well. And we're probably just going to feed it through RC20 anyway, right? So you're going to distort whatever you put in. So don't worry too much about trying to be perfect. Worry about like the music and how it sounds and playing it and the volume. Like I think the volume is the most important thing. Like you get the volume right. And then everything else you can kind of fix with EQ and whatnot. So that's what I'm doing now. Just basically just like I throw my mic to the side, I record it. And then I do it by like probably about 12 inches away from the 12th fret. Like that's my technical like bit of knowledge that I would recommend. It's like, you know, kind of point at the 12th fret so you're not pointing at the sound hole. Otherwise it's a little bit boxy. And then run it through, you know, when you just use EQ to make sure you pull off all the low end and then maybe around like 250, 300, pull some of that down to get rid of some of that, you know, boxiness there. And then whatever sounds good. I always like the saying, if it sounds good, it is good. And I think one of the things as producers, you know, there's so much information out there, a lot of YouTube videos, and everyone goes into like all this technical detail about mixing and all these things you have to think about. At the end of the day, if it sounds good, that's what matters, right? So it doesn't matter if we're like doing something that's not technically correct. Just make sure you like it, and that's what I go for. And that's at the end of the day, I think what we should all be striving for.
Yeah, I started off actually in a similar fashion whenever I was recording acoustic guitars. Everything had to be perfect. I closed the door. Well, it's not really a studio, to my bedroom. I made sure that I turned off my speakers so that there was no hum. I sat as still as I could on my chair to not make any creaking noises. And now, yeah, I've come to the same idea where it doesn't really matter. It makes it real. It makes it organic. All of these noises, even sometimes, because we live pretty close to a road, we can hear cars passing by. Like, and if I compress my audio and turn the volume up, you can hear the cars driving past in my live recordings. But it adds to the atmosphere, as you say. It makes it like lo-fi is not meant to be this super clean, sanitized genre. It's real. It's the music that we produce just with whatever equipment we have, and it's kind of just this artistic representation of ourselves. And yeah, we shouldn't overthink things. We shouldn't force it to be so perfect, because that kind of, it takes away from the character of it.
Yeah, that's, I think that goes back to like when I was talking about how I started before I was doing lo-fi, right? I was like direct into the amp, no effects, whatever. Like it's imperfect. And I think lo-fi gives them that same feeling. It's like the feeling you get when you're playing live with a band. Nothing's perfect, but it sounds good because everyone is jiving, they're vibing together, right? And like you can get the same effect with lo-fi music. It sounds real. And we'll talk about this probably a little bit, I think, but I've been a playlist curator now for a while, and when I get submissions that sound sterile, like they've been perfectly recorded in a studio, I mean, like, everything, the musicianship can be perfect. Like you can have somebody who's obviously a fantastic musician playing beautiful guitar and drums sound perfect and crisp. I don't like it. Like it doesn't sound lo-fi to me, right? Like I'll pass on those types of songs, even though they sound great. It's missing that soul, like that vibe that I like to hear when I'm listening to lo-fi music. It's like it's missing some atmosphere that we need to feel at peace and calm.
So you mentioned a little bit there about creating playlists, and you were talking about sort of accepting tracks that weren't so perfect, really had that essence of lo-fi. And so like in creating playlists, how has this helped you sort of get a better understanding of sort of like the lo-fi scene, and maybe sort of how people try to get sort of playlist placements and things like that?
Yeah, I think this is something I like talking about a bit because I think playlist curators, there's a lot of talk, a lot of chat about playlist curation and curators on Discord and on especially on Reddit. I think if you go to look at music marketing, people have this really negative connotation, I guess. There's a negative vibe, I think, sometimes when it comes to curation. But I think for me, it's been eye-opening in terms of how it works. Like I started creating playlists because I like at one point I was like, I think at some point I want to start a record label, but I wanted to have like a playlist ecosystem for whatever I did. And I figured I was like, you know what, the best way to try that, to see if if I had something I want to do, is just start curating playlists and start trying to grow them and see how that works. And then get into the curation side using like platforms like Submit Hub and Groover and see what that looks like. And so that's what I did. I did that about a year ago. I started building playlist, and I want to talk a little bit about building playlists because I think that'll be interesting. But let's talk about curation first. So I built my playlist to the point where I could get into Submit Hub, and I've probably been on there now for over 6 months. No, it's been over 9 months now because I look at my stats. I'm over 9 months, and I really started to kind of understand now like why some like curators will say certain things when you reach out to them on Submit Hub. For one, if I talk about my playlist, like, so I'm curating, I have one main, I call it my main playlist, which is like a sleepy, just north of sleepy vibe. It's like a little bit more than sleepy. I call it my focus. Lo-fi deep focus is the name of it. So it's meant to like put on while you're working and focusing. So I'm very cognizant about trying to maintain the vibe and maintain a sound in that list, because number one, it took a lot of investment to build it to where it is today. And also I need to maintain like the number of listeners who are coming in and listening. And Submit Hub specifically actually tracks the number of plays that songs that are getting playlisted in those playlists get. And they will assign you an engagement score based on how your playlists are doing. And that's part of like a factor that drives how much you can charge in credits on Submit Hub. So I think for me, it's like I want to make sure I maintain the consistent vibe that I've created that are keeping people coming back to that playlist. And so that in mind, when I get songs, I'm listening very closely to make sure, like, I want to be able to put that on that playlist, and I want it to mix with what's in there, so that when somebody hits that song, they're not going to skip over it. And I've also found out, like, that Spotify actually takes in account, like, how many times people are skipping through songs in a playlist. And so if people are going through a playlist and they're skipping them, it will change your ranking in the search algorithm. So this is what I understand. I don't know if this is true. I could be completely wrong, but this is what I've read. That skipped in playlists actually have an effect on where you rank in searches in Spotify. And right now I'm lucky in that my main playlist is actually ranking like number 1, number 2, and number 3 in searches for like lo-fi focus or deep focus for Spotify, which actually has resulted in like a lot of organic plays and ads. So I want to be able to maintain that. Like that's super important, because it's like I don't want to disrupt the algorithm. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then from there, as songs come in, I'm making sure they fit. I have a couple of other playlists that I started because I wanted to be able to kind of playlist outside of that like specific sound, because there's like I get a lot of submissions for things that are a little bit more upbeat, that are more beat driven. I also love, like I go back to the folk hop. I have a playlist for folk hop music. So I'm trying to playlist specific genres and moods and activities. And I found like specifically in Spotify, things that work really well are like activities based playlists, like study, lo-fi for study, lo-fi for sleep. Those things work really well. When it comes to like the curation side, like on a platform like Submit Hub, when you decline somebody, Submit Hub requires you to put in like a reason why you're declining them. So you can't just, unless you like when you're submitting to Submit Hub and you set up your campaign, you can say I want specific and honest feedback or gentle feedback, or just listen to my song. You have to listen to like for at least 80 seconds, I think it is. And most people, like 9 out of 10 times, people are selecting, they want honest feedback. So as a Submit Hub responder or curator, I have to provide feedback on the song, and I have to tell you why I didn't playlist it. But there's a lot of times where like a song will come in, I'm like, this is a great song. Like I was mentioning, you get these songs that are like super well produced. They sound beautiful. They're like, there's nothing wrong with the song. It just doesn't fit my playlist. But I still kind of have to find like a critique, because, like the way that Submit Hub is like the way that, what people are expecting when they select honest feedback is that there's going to be some kind of critique. And I think we've all kind of trained ourselves too, as submit, like as artists and also Submit Hub curators, like there has to be like a negative reason why we don't put your song in, because otherwise artists are gonna be like, well, you told me my song was great, but you still didn't playlist it. So that, I think that's kind of like we get into this cycle of like saying something negative because that song just didn't fit the vibe, even though it's really a good song. So one of the things I just want to get like make people aware of is like, hey, just because you're getting negative feedback on Submit Hub doesn't mean anything, right? It just means that your song doesn't fit the particular vibe for that curator. What does matter though is if you send it to 20 curators and you get a whole bunch of the same feedback. Like if you submit their song and you get like, say you get 5 or 6 curators that say, hey, your drums are too loud. Like maybe your drums are too loud. Like that's good information. But like if one person says it out of the 20, it probably doesn't mean a whole lot, right? You don't know like where that person's listening. They could be listening on studio monitors that are bringing out a particular frequency, or they could be listening on, AirPods. You don't really know. And so you got to take everything with a grain of salt, but they think the feedback can be valuable. The other thing, like as an artist submitting to Submit Hub, and I personally still use Submit Hub, even though I know how it works. Like now that I know how it works, I know how to optimize my campaigns so that I can get like, 80% acceptance. And one of the best things you can do is like Submit Hub specifically has a list of favorites. So when you get playlisted by somebody and maybe they playlist you every time, mark them as a favorite, keep them in a list, and you can have your list, your like create a go-to list for your sound, right? That's like, these are my more than likely going to accept my song curators. And so every campaign I'm going to submit to them. And then you have maybe your like, these are the guys that are a little more selective, but they definitely like my genre of music. Then you know, they could be your tier 2. So I think it's important, like, maintain a list of people who you know are more than likely they're going to accept your music. And Submit Hub does like show you how selective. They'll tell you like if somebody accepts 50% of the songs or 80%. So you have an idea of like how selective they are. Use all that stuff. Like, but before you start submitting, like, do some research too. Like, if you've never submitted to somebody before, you should probably listen to their playlist that they have listed to see if your song even fits their vibe. Because, and I've done it so many times where I'll like submit a sleepy song to somebody with a boom bap playlist. Like, they're not going to accept that song, even if like my song is good. But I'm not, like, we all want to get, like, especially on release day, like we just want to get our music out there for everyone to hear, because we work so hard on it. We're so excited it launched, that we just launched this $100 Submit Hub campaign, and then we get 20% or 30% acceptance, and we're like, oh man, this is crazy, my song's horrible. Like, that might not be true. Like, maybe you just went to the wrong curators, the ones that aren't going to would never play your song just because it's not the right genre. So you got to do the legwork and set up your playlist or your favorite list. But when you do that, you can really like, you can run so much better campaigns. And one of the things I noticed, and I'm always thinking about like trying to figure out how the algorithm of Spotify works, like what triggers what, how do you get radio plays? What are the most important things? Like when I launch a song, like what's going to get the radio to pick it up? And I found like if I get myself on about 10 playlists, that my chances of radio picking it up, like in those first 3-4 days, go up almost to like 100%. Like, and I think there's other factors, right? There's like, I'm sure your popularity as an artist and other things go into it. But if I don't playlist a song and I just let it try to organically move, it won't. So, kickstarting and getting that first, I think I was talking to Cucumella. I think he told me, he's like, you got to get to that first 1,000 plays in that first week. Like, you get that, and then some of the algorithms start to take off. I think there's truth to that. And I think getting into 10 playlists will help you kind of get there. And they have to be like, ones that will produce 1,000 streams in a week. But like, to me, that's been a technique that's worked pretty well. And so like, out of building these playlists, I actually spent like the last probably 6 months just self-releasing mostly. Like I was working, a lot of us will use labels, but I was like, I just want to try self-releasing and see how that goes. And by using like my own playlist and these other playlists, I was able to really kind of build the stream counts that I was seeing by releasing with labels. So I kind of like, okay, I think I figured this thing out just a little bit. At least I know kind of how to get things moving.
So it's kind of been doing a little bit more research, I guess, before you submit to these different playlists. And yeah, as you say, building up sort of this sort of, what's the term? Yeah, like just favorites, these playlists that that you have a better chance of getting placements with. Because I recently, just with time, I haven't been spending time doing campaigns with my music. But whenever I used to do independent releases, I did have a few select playlists that I would go to. And because I had those saved in like a bookmarks folder in my PC, because I don't know, I just had my own way of doing it. But yeah, the actual chance of getting placed on that playlist was a lot higher than others. But I'm learning so much hearing what you're saying right now. And like, I might try to utilize some of these little tips and tricks to get on playlists. So like, especially for any people who are sort of starting off in the lo-fi scene and figuring this out, what you've just said is extremely valuable information. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's a couple of other services out there outside of Submit Hub. The other one I'd recommend using is Daily Playlists because it's free. The playlists are small, like that are. I take that back because there's a lot of larger playlists on there. Um, what I've found is that um, I think it's better to target the smaller playlist and daily playlist because those are most likely curators who are trying to build followers in their list. And when you the way the daily playlist works is if you submit to a song, there's a gate and you'll end up following a playlist and probably an artist and a song. So artists will use that, or curators will use that to start building followers so they can get to a certain, maybe get to 1,000 followers or whatever, so they can get their playlist onto these other platforms. So you're more likely, I think, to get a play or get an addition to playlists like 200, 300 followers on daily playlist and say one that has 1 or 2,000 followers, especially if that person is on other platforms like Submit Hub or Groover. But I think that you get free submissions and you might as well take advantage of them. And I think that's a safe platform. There are other things out there. Like when I first started, I used the wheel of playlist on DistroKid. I don't know if you've ever used that, but you would spin a wheel and you would get randomly placed on DistroKid's like big playlist of every song that gets released on DistroKid. And that's where I would get picked up by those botted playlists from that playlist. They would basically look at that list and then pull your song in I would get botted. And, that's when you hear about those people that get their songs taken down because the scammer playlist will put you on there, bought 1,000 streams, and then you're getting a takedown notice from Spotify. Like, don't use that. I don't recommend using that, but like Submit Hub is vetted, like all the playlists there are vetted for bots. And so I think Daily Playlist and Groover as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good information because I'm thinking now that I've had at least 2 tracks that I've had the issues with botted streams. Like there's one track that overnight I got like 40,000 streams on and I was extremely confused. And then thankfully the track didn't get taken down, but yeah, all of the streams were removed and there was a whole lot of unnecessary panic around it. So I think just, sort of, as you say, making sure that the playlist that you're submitting to has been vetted is one thing. But the fact that the platforms have done that already takes a lot of that worry away. Yeah. And so then in terms of growing these playlists and getting people to add them and sort of save them in their favorites in Spotify, how does that work? And then eventually sort of bloom into what you're doing now and starting up your own label?
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of like, if you go to Reddit music marketing, which is where I think a lot of people will go to try to figure out how this stuff works. There's a lot of talk about starting, build your own playlist, drive your own streams. And I think that's like, there's a lot of truth to that. But building followers is not something that happens overnight and it's not free. So in order to build followers, you've got to advertise using meta ads. And I put in like probably a couple $1,000s now in meta ads over the course of a year. Building followers in the playlist. And those are the ones that stick around because they're going to see the ad and then they go to the playlist, they save it, and then they stream it again intentionally. Getting follows from things like Daily Playlist and other things that have gates, like those followers, they don't listen to your music. So it's kind of more of it's a number, it's a vanity number, but it doesn't actually mean anything. So at the end of the day, like we want to build a playlist that doesn't not only has like followers, but followers who actually listen to the music. That's really like, and that goes back to like Submit Hub. Look at the engagement scores at the playlist, like, or at least the curators. Like if they have an engagement score of like 7, 8, 9, like those are the ones who have actual real people listening to their music intentionally over and over again. You'll see people like curators and have playlists with 100,000 followers on them, but an engagement score of 3. Like they have a lot of followers, but not a lot of listeners. And so, you have to really build those up and use meta ads, but then continue to use meta ads even once you've built them. So like even now that I've got like my largest playlist has like 5,300 followers, which isn't big in the grand scheme of things. But I still run meta ads on it. And, but I'm also getting like amazing stream counts. Like I could like more streams than I get on radio, more streams than I get on the playlist that have 150,000 followers. It's like it, and that's because I run meta ads. I also have good SEO. I'm lucky. I think I got very lucky in some cases. But it's working. But all my other playlists, every playlist I make, now I'm running meta ads on them. So it kind of adds up, right? It's like, okay, I've got to run meta ads on one playlist. Now I've got two. I've got to run it on two. I want to do ambient. I'm doing ambient playlisting. So I've got meta ads on that one. So all this stuff kind of adds up. And it is a significant investment. The way that it works for me as a curator is Submit Hub pays for my ads. So basically everything I make on Submit Hub goes back into advertising. That's, it's a cycle of build the playlist, become a curator, put all that money back into the system, and then do it over and over again. That's kind of what I'm at. Like I'm doing that. But that's how you do it. Like you have to invest, you have to build, you have to put the time into it. And then you can't just like stop doing it. You have to continue to do it. And that's why like I'm harping on playlisting, because I think like most people, like unless you want to be a curator, building your own playlist is like it's an ongoing thing and it has to pay for itself. Some like even though I'm not in this to make money, I think most like a lot of people I know aren't making their full-time living off of this. We also don't want to go broke doing it either, right? So you have to like do things that make sense financially, especially if you're married, because your significant other doesn't want to find out you spend more money in advertising than you're making curating. Hopefully she doesn't see this. But at the end of the day, like I think as artists and musicians, like use the curators, use their playlist, and if you really want to do the playlist thing, then go for it. But just know that you're going to be you have to invest in meta ads to do it. And it's going to take time. It's going to take money.
Yeah. The whole idea that I once heard of, where it's better to have 1,000 true fans than 100,000 who just only sort of bypasses, is coming back to memory, because they were saying that if you had 1,000 true fans, that spent $100 on your work, that's 100,000 a year. You can make a living out of music. Whereas if you had like 100,000 fans, but they might only spend the odd person out of that 100,000 might spend $1 here, $20 there, and that's not going to mount up to something that you can live off. Not that lo-fi is a genre that many of us are going to be able to completely survive from, but still, it's the idea of having, if you have smaller numbers that are actually dedicated, is much better than having this inflated follower count that don't really take any interest in the playlists that they've saved.
It's exactly true.
And so then, with you starting your label now and working on sort of releasing tracks with people, how did this build from making these playlists and sort of becoming more significant in the lo-fi community?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to do a label at some point, like, and it stemmed a little bit from like, I was seeing there's some labels that were coming out or that were popping up, and I'm like, they would sign you as an artist, but then they wouldn't really do anything for you. Like they would just kind of like, you would release with them and they wouldn't promote the music, and the artist got nothing out of that relationship other than, a much smaller cut than they would have had if they went to DistroKid. And I didn't think that was fair. Like I didn't like I don't like that that model of just trying, like taking songs and at volume and distributing them. And at the same time, I also like, as I was getting more into folk hop and more of this other like acoustic based lo-fi, I'm like, it's really hard to find like homes label wise for, like that type of music. And so I'm like, there's two problems I wanted to solve. Like number one, I don't want to be a label. I want to have a label that is actively trying to market their artist. And two, I want a label that specifically enjoys and likes lo-fi music with acoustic instrumentation. Now, maybe not folk hop. Like I'd like folk hop, and I think like that's an area that I want to further invest in. But I'm not just talking folk hop. I'm talking about like, sleepier lo-fi with acoustic guitars and stuff like that. Like, stuff where there's a home for what I'm calling like lo-fi with soul, or my tagline for my label, which is called Through the Trees, Lo-Fi with Roots. More of a lo-fi that you felt like could be played by a live band. And so that's what I created. Like, so I had this idea in the back of my head, like I wanted to do this. But like I said, I started building playlists, knowing that eventually this is where I want to go. And I wanted to be able to support the artist. And my friend Johnny Abbey, who started the lo-fi label Cat Cafe, he was a super nice guy. One day he's like, dude, you got to start a label. Like your playlists are creating so many streams. I'm like, it's funny you say that, because I really wanted to do that. And I just, I didn't know if now's the time, but now, but I think he was right. And he finally like kind of kickstarted me into action. And so I went down the route of building this out and actually creating the label. And I didn't realize it, but labels are pretty serious business. Like, at the end of the day, it's a company. You have contracts, you've got contracts with your artist. You also have contracts with the distributor, that you need to figure out who you're going to use. I ended up going with Dashco. And then you have to account, you have to have accounting, you have to do all this other stuff, right? I mean, I'm lucky, like I run a business in my day to day. So I'm like, this is nothing like this. I do this all the time. Which is another area where I think like, for me as running a label, it makes a lot of sense. It's like, I kind of have a business mind. I know how to make it work from a business perspective. And I'm finally at the point where I feel like I've made enough connections and progress on my playlist where I can really offer something to artists who want to work with me. So officially I haven't officially launched for open submissions yet, but over the weekend, I officially announced that I have started and announced a lo-fi compilation album with with the record Lo-Fi Castle from Luke Daly. So that we created a compilation album called Summer Morning Sessions, which is all about that kind of early morning vibe in the summer. Those songs, like I mentioned, just north of sleepy, something you want to put on while you have your morning coffee and relax and get started in the day. So like we've announced that the submissions are open until April 17th. So depending on when this goes, submissions may still be open. And also I was talking to my friends at Nick and Pepper from Lo-Fi Sounds, and they've released a sample pack of 25 sounds that will work great with this compilation. So that's going to be available for free, I think now on Luke's Discord, and I'll be posting that up on social media. So I'm pretty lucky to have supporters, and community in this organization. And that's the other thing that's crazy about this whole thing. Like, we're talking about like earlier on as an artist, like you're getting started and everyone's propping you up and helping you get started. And I thought as a label, like, man, none of these guys are want to help me. I'm going to be competition, right? Like, why would they want to help me out? And everybody is like super helpful and sharing all sorts of information to help me get started. And it just goes back again to this community, which is full of people who just want to see like the genre grow and help people be successful doing this and like making this music. So it's amazing to me that like these people out there exist and are so helpful. I'm happy to be part of it and be able to share like whatever knowledge I've learned. I'm happy to share with others who ask. I think that this community feeling just begets more community vibes, as like, if if other people treat you well, then you want to treat other people well. Like, I think that just seems to happen both in the label space as well as the artist space.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just, it makes me smile hearing the fact that even whenever you're starting a new label, that the people in the lo-fi community, they don't see it as a new competition popping up. It's something that they want to support, something they want to help grow. And this is just, it's the lack of, as I said earlier in the interview, the lack of the selfishness. It's where everybody's helping each other. And yeah, the willingness that everybody has to help each other is, and just even in some way or another, if we can help promote that as well in this podcast project. And it's what makes everything worthwhile in this whole genre. And so before we wrap up this interview, I'd just like to ask you one last question, in that if you were to go back and chat to Nothern Drift when he was starting out lo-fi, what would you tell this young producer?
Yeah, the young producer from 2 years ago, when I was 43. Yeah, I don't know if I would tell myself anything. I would just sit back and look and watch myself and be like, look how far you've come, right? Like, really, the journey of getting from there to here has been so much fun, and I don't think I would change anything about it, right? It's just like, the people I've met, the songs that I've released, even the ones that I released in the very beginning that I go back and I'm like, I can't believe I released that. Like, I just love it all. Like, it's so much fun to go back. And yeah, I wouldn't say anything to myself. I just watch. So yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, just keep on watching and keep on growing and keep on going forward. I think, yeah, that's perfect. Well, here, thank you so much for this interview. It was great to chat to you. Great to hear all these little bits of wisdom from your musical journey, and even learning so much myself about how, I can submit to playlists better and sort of target it in a more intelligent way. And so this has been a great learning experience, not just for some of the people who will listen to this, but just for me as well. So thank you so much for being willing to come along and chat on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I 100% enjoyed it. I look forward to hearing more interviews from you in the years to come. So yeah,
well, here, all the best, and hopefully chat to you again soon. See you around.
Sounds good. Thank you.